In the spring of 2026, when the Artemis II spacecraft launched on its journey to the moon, it was carrying Christina Koch, the first person ever to edit Wikipedia from space. When she corrected records about one of her spacewalks during 320 days at the International Space Station in 2019. When we think about Wikipedia, we sometimes imagine it like the view from space, a vast resource that combines the shared light of people around the world. The English language version alone has over 7 million articles, and according to economists, contributes roughly $42 billion a year in consumer surplus to the US economy, despite not costing anything. Many Mew, like us, have asked, how in the world can people build something so imaginably grand? As a computer scientist and social scientist, I study what Wikipedia reveals about the potential for human cooperation. Our research helps Wikipedians worldwide understand how to organize more effectively. In this video, I'm going to introduce you to some basics of Wikipedia, how researchers study it, and how you can contribute to this marvel of human cooperation with the tools of research. Every light starts with a spark, and the basic unit of collaboration on Wikipedia is a single edit to a page, something that Valentin Nefedov discovered when he was 12 years old, a bit bored at his parents' house in a village outside the city of Lviv in Ukraine. Valentin's family's village doesn't have many photos on the internet, and Google hasn't ever sent a camera car down its roads. But this village of 235 people did have a very small Ukrainian language Wikipedia page. And over a decade ago, a 12-year-old Valentin decided to add to it. He got a pencil, paper, walked down the roads, and counted. There are 42 garden societies in the village. Gardening is deeply important in Ukrainian society, and garden societies are a basic social unit in many communities. But without a citation, the edit was eventually removed. That didn't stop Valentin, who went on to add information about his local media station, his favorite shows, and other small fixes. For scientists who study cooperation, the mystery of Wikipedia is how more than 100 million people like Valentin and Christina, all adding edits from small towns and outer space, from a constellation of independent nonprofit community groups, have somehow created an extraordinary collection of knowledge that anyone can freely enjoy. Economists call Wikipedia a public good since it's not exclusive, and since each time a reader or contributor becomes more knowledgeable, we all benefit. It's also peer-produced. People share what they know and get what they need. It's the world's biggest mutual aid circle. To illustrate how that happens, let's imagine 3 Wikipedia pages that mean a lot to us in central New York, that each get edited by volunteers multiple times a month. The first is our bus system, which offered 2.85 million rides in 2024. The second is Cornell University, which has over 16,000 students. This photo of our New York City campus was published by NYC Wikipedian Jim Henderson. Thanks, Jim. And the third is Harriet Tubman, the 19th century abolitionist, spy, and social reformer who taught Sunday school at St. James African Methodist Episcopal Church here in Ithaca. Some articles, like Harriet Tubman's, are viewed by hundreds of thousands each month, especially during Black History Month. Cornell University gets tens of thousands of views per month, often going up and down with student interest in admissions. And our beloved bus system gets viewed 200 to 250 times a month, and its data informs thousands of others. In fact, when we ask chatbots a question about the bus, it links back to Wikipedia. In statistics, we use distributions to illustrate the shape of participation, illustrated beautifully through dinosaurs by my friend Tamara. In this chart, you can think about the left-right axis as popularity and the up-down axis as how many articles get that number of views. Across Wikipedia, most edits happen when people document something they uniquely know and care about. Christina's spacewalk, Valentin's village, our local bus. Those contributions are the head of the Pareto distribution, while the few popular articles are at the tail. And this is how human cooperation often works more broadly. On a day like today, for every person giving a talk, there are dozens of people whose committed, less visible work has made this event a success. I'm a researcher at the Citizens and Technology Lab, where we work together with the public to test questions like this, to test the social impacts of digital technology and discover effective ideas for change. Over the years, we've worked closely with many Wikipedians around the world, including a group that organizes photographs from African contributors. Many of the most important people and stories aren't yet included in Wikipedia, especially from the majority world. One project, Wiki Loves Africa, works to change that by organizing communities in countries like Sudan, Tanzania, and Cote d'Ivoire to contribute photographs to stories about Africa. In 2019, we worked with Wiki Loves Africa on a symbol randomized trial. We took the list of people who contributed previously, we sorted them by how recently they had participated, randomly assigned them to a treatment and control group to receive reminders, and then watched if they contributed photos in 2019. The reason this mattered is that a detail of how Wikipedia is designed made communities unsure if the messaging system actually reached people in a meaningful way, and the simplest way to find out was to try. We found that overall, past contestants were 1.2 percentage points more likely to re-enter the competition if they got a recruitment message. For previous year's participants, who were more likely to re-enter regardless, the effect was larger, with a 2.7 percentage points more return. That might seem small, but that simple message helped recruit 70 experienced former contributors across numerous countries to add photos, as well as support and mentor other photographers for the first time. Our experiments led to over 2,000 more photographs that wouldn't have been published that year and yielded recruitment insights used by other projects around the world. So the first lesson from Wikipedia that we've learned from science is that to support everyone, welcome people with unique perspectives. But sometimes something you care about becomes popular whether you like it or not. That is what happened to Valentin and millions of other Ukrainians on February 24, 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine in a war that still continues. One thing Valentin remembers about that day is that he was the person who created the Ukrainian Wikipedia article for the invasion, a page that hundreds of thousands of people look to for accurate information about the war. Here's what the day of the invasion looked like in the data. Views to Ukrainian Wikipedia increased substantially, but active contributors declined as their lives were disrupted. Valentin and I are working together to study how the Ukrainian Wikipedia organized to meet this demand. And that brings us to a second question. Can you really trust an encyclopedia that anyone can edit during a conflict? Can you trust a resource that opposing sides have a chance to shape? Valentin told me about a debate in 2023 about how to describe a man who was president of Ukraine before the war. Some people called him an oligarch, and other people disagreed. On Wikipedia, anyone can click the talk page to debate what should go onto the ultimate article, and they did. Eventually, Valentin stepped in. The community's goal is a neutral page with the most reliable information from published sources, so he suggested that they cite all of the arguments. First, what the media says, then what Poroshenko himself says, and what Ukrainians say in polls. Even when people disagreed on this one issue, they still agreed that a good encyclopedia would mention reliable information on all sides, and this language has continued on the site. Valentin's question was the starting point for a paper by Feng Shi and colleagues to find out whether political diversity on Wikipedia did actually result in higher quality articles, especially given the incentives for misinformation and conflict. To study this, Shi and colleagues looked at articles in the US about politics and asked, are there distinct groups on Wikipedia based on politics? Are some articles edited more by partisans than others? And are articles with more diverse editors higher quality? The first thing they needed to do was to find a measure of the political leaning of an author. If they could guess or infer whether an editor was more liberal or more conservative, they could then calculate the diversity of a group of editors and whether they were very similar in leaning or very different in their politics. The problem, of course, is that we can't observe someone's political beliefs or commitments very directly. Instead, researchers need to take what we can observe and infer from that what someone's politics might be. That's what Feng Shi and colleagues did. They labeled US politics Wikipedia articles and labeled them to be more left or right-leaning. They then computed for each editor the relative proportion of liberal or conservative articles that they edit, and then also surveyed some of the people to see how closely those measures correlated. The measure of what we might call political specialization has a certain amount of bias and error, but they concluded it was close enough for their purposes among people who edit political articles in the US. Next, they described editors who contributed to political articles overall, and they found that many editors have diverse expertise. Some other editors focus on one other area of knowledge, sometimes on opposing sides of a political disagreement. For example, only editing pages for politicians from a single party. Using this information, it's possible to describe an article by whether it is edited by people just on one side, by people in the middle, or by people with opposing and different specializations. The scientists then applied this analysis to articles in science, politics, and social issues across English Wikipedia. For each article, they looked at whether the editors specialized in writing about the right or the left. In those cases, the dot for the article would be more on the right or on the left of the chart. If contributors to the article had more diverse or even opposing expertise, the dot would be placed in the middle. This chart shows the alignment of editors plotted against the number of people who contributed to the article, the vertical axis. They found that popular articles with more editors attract more diverse, polarized contributors that balance each other out, while less popular articles tend to attract more specialists. Next, they study the relationship between editor diversity and article quality. In this chart, articles further on the right are higher quality, and articles higher on the chart have more diverse, polarized editors. On average, the researchers found that articles with more editor diversity are considered higher quality by the English Wikipedia community. And that's the second lesson from this science, that diversity and disagreement can make something better, even if it sometimes takes some debate to get there. Managing disagreements does involve a lot of work, and it's just one of the kinds of tasks Valentin takes on in his role as a leader. As the war in Ukraine continued, people who lost loved ones looked to Wikipedia as a place to share their memories. But these memorials often violate Wikipedia's rules. That means someone has the unpleasant task of telling an editor that their article about a loved one is going to be deleted. This task falls on Wikipedia's leaders, a role held by Valentin. But instead of just deleting these pages, Valentin wanted to remove them in the kindest way possible. So he developed a protocol. When removing memorial pages, he explained Wikipedia's rules and why the memorial was in violation of them. And then he provided information about where they could share their memorials. And importantly, he passed along his condolences. But that wasn't all. In addition to this protocol, Valentin also contributed to an article with tips for people who might consider adding memorials. Guides like these can help reduce the risk of people experiencing the pain of deletion on top of the pain of losing their loved one to war. This brings us to our third question. What kind of leadership is needed to sustain trustworthy cooperation? There's real concern about this question. In the largest Wikipedias, like in the English language Wikipedia shown in these charts, we can see that while new pages keep getting added, the number of editors has not remained at the high levels Wikipedia experienced when it was new 20 years ago. And so researchers have looked into why that might be. One possibility is that when people care deeply about a topic, the conversations can get heated, and sometimes people are rude, disrespectful, needlessly aggressive, or make personal accusations. A group of researchers found that roughly 1 in 100 of the Wikipedians who participate in English toxic public discussions have ever left a toxic comment towards someone else. It's rare, but common enough to make a difference. This chart shows the impact of toxic comments on editors' activity. It's just a snapshot, but it does a nice job of visualizing what happens after people receive a toxic comment, which are represented by the red triangles. Not everyone responds the same way. At the top, a person gets a toxic comment but keeps editing. At the bottom, someone who is editing pretty consistently needed to take a break after receiving a toxic comment. And in the middle, someone didn't edit again ever after receiving a second toxic comment. When the authors looked at how this plays out overall, they found that toxic comments consistently reduce activity between 1/2 to 2 active days. These impacts are not distributed equally. Studies of English Wikipedia have found that women editors engage in what's known as emotional labor. This is the work it takes to manage your own emotions and those of others. So, for example, women editors have described avoiding work that could result in conflict and described being the targets of online abuse, but they persevere because contributing to Wikipedia is important to them. While these problems aren't fully resolved, there's a group of people who take on special leadership responsibilities with their language and globally to help manage these issues. People like Valentin. These leaders play a variety of roles. They wield the ban hammer, which allows them to ban or unban users, delete and undelete pages, and apply page protections. With the ban hammer, these leaders fight trolls. They're also builders. They develop tools that can automate some of the work required to quickly tackle vandalism and help make Wikipedia more trustworthy. But importantly, they're also gardeners. They help Wikipedia grow by giving editors feedback and helping them resolve conflicts. This often requires a lot of empathy and emotional labor, just like we saw with Valentin. So our third lesson from the science of Wikipedia is that effective cooperation requires care, and that can be hard work. When I talked with Valentin, he remarked that if people only hear about the hard work, they might not want to volunteer. So I asked him what makes him feel proud and fulfilled. Valentin told me about the community, of times when people trusted him with questions, moments when he could mentor younger people to get started, and all the people he's met around the world who care about free knowledge. And this is a question not just for Wikipedia, but for us all. What can we do about this? Several years ago, Cat Lab's Julia Kamen, Max Klein, and I met with a group of community leaders to imagine interventions to sustain participation on Wikipedia. When Wikipedians created a feature for thanking others for their contributions, they hoped to encourage a welcoming culture and also provide a way to encourage contributors to keep volunteering. By the time we started our research, Wikipedians were sending nearly 70,000 of these private messages per month. Leaders in the movement wanted to know, how might the exchange of appreciation help grow and sustain Wikipedia? To understand their question, it's important to think about the structure of exchange on Wikipedia. Scientists often study gratitude in terms of direct reciprocity. You help someone, they thank you, and that appreciation includes a promise of future help. Scientists also study indirect reciprocity, where a person does something and receives praise that grows their reputation, with the expectation that third parties will help in the future. In upstream reciprocity, people help others and express thanks without any expectation of direct value in return, knowing that others will be helped and maybe they'll be helped by a third person someday. That's what Wikipedia is often like. You often don't know who will benefit from your contributions, and when you thank someone privately, it's part of a system of upstream appreciation. When leaders asked about their thanks feature, they were asking about upstream appreciation. To study the effects of receiving thanks, we organized a group of hundreds of volunteers across 4 language Wikipedias and built a list of people whose edits were especially worthy of thanks. In a randomized trial, volunteers used our app to send thanks to over 2,700 newcomers and experienced editors alike. We then waited to see what happened over the following months. The study is still under review, but in our preliminary results across all languages for both newcomers and experienced accounts, people who received thanks remained active on Wikipedia for longer periods of time and also spent more time making edits. The study also discovered something powerful about gratitude that applies beyond Wikipedia. It spreads. People assigned to received thanks went on to send 61% more thanks to others, usually to someone new. Sending someone appreciation causes them to share gratitude further with others. So even when things are hard, relationships, community, and gratitude sustain cooperation over time. So having seen these studies, how does research like this actually make a difference in the world? As scientists, we contribute knowledge to journals and share the results with our students, and we also hope our findings improve people's lives in some way. Here are some lessons from our work on Wikipedia on how this work can make a difference. And it all comes down to who you share your work with and who you're in conversation with. First, because Wikimedia is a movement, not a company, some of the most influential outcomes of our work happen through the local institutions, regional Wikimedia chapters, museums, libraries, and regional funders, and even language Wikipedia. Each language Wikipedia has a page called the Village Pump, where the community can read and discuss your work. So make sure to share it there. Next, there's a global movement of researchers who study Wikipedia. We have a mailing list, an annual Wiki workshop, as well as the global Wikimedia movement, who can be reached through the Wikipedia signpost, a newspaper by Wikipedians about the movement, and the annual Wikimania conference. 2027 will be in Chile. And finally, sometimes it's possible for the Wikimedia Foundation to adopt findings from research as well. There's typically a monthly Wikimedia research showcase, though it's on pause for now. And it can also be helpful to find the person in the foundation who works on the issue you take on, something you can often find by posting to the Village Pump and sharing your work in the signpost. To scientists, Wikipedia is more than an encyclopedia. It's a way for humanity to learn more about our collective potential. And what we learn from the science of Wikipedia is that cooperation depends on unique perspectives. Diversity and disagreement may be hard, but they can make things better. Cooperation is sustained through care and sparked and tended through the gratitude we share with each other. And these findings are things that are carried forward not just by a company and by engineers, but by the movement of global people who are in conversation and relationship with scientists as we make these discoveries together. With that in mind, I want to express appreciation to everyone who helped me put this lecture together, to Sarah Gilbert at the Citizens and Technology Lab, to the Templeton World Charity Foundation, and especially the Wikimedia Foundation and our wonderful colleagues across the Summer Institutes in Computational Social Science. I hope this is a helpful introduction to you, and I am very excited to see what you will discover about Wikipedia.